Hi, so I'm just going to talk to you about some ideas from Baudrillard and relate it to reality television, as well as very briefly ethos, logos, pathos. But we're going to look at postmodernism and these ideas and relate it to television and also social media at some level. So just to begin by saying that actually in postmodernism there's this idea that there are truths and knowledges rather than an overarching truth and knowledge. So this idea that there are no grand narratives, no big stories, if you like. So this is about the loss of ideas such as one overarching belief system. So it's also highlights this idea of how signs tend to dominate. So there's an overproduction of signs, which wipes out distinction between images and reality. So this idea that we're drowning in a sea of signs. So these are some of the ideas of postmodernism, that we're living in this world of flux and nothing's stable, and we don't really know what's going on in terms of truth and lies and knowledges. We don't know what to believe. For example, anything goes is another phrase that's often associated with postmodernism. So just stop and think, what does postmodernism mean? You might want to go and look up the term somewhere and find a simple definition and think about the kind of things you associate with the term. But also you might want to look up other ideas like post-postmodernity or transmodern, because there are competing ideas, and some suggest that we've moved out of a postmodern era, but we still don't quite know what to call it. So there are lots of other ideas around as well. So have a look and think about those kind of ideas. So really for this session I'm drawing on Jean Baudrillard, who is a French philosopher and sociologist. And some consider him to have been quite an extreme proponent of postmodernity. So the ideas that he explored include things like our world no longer being real because we've been overtaken by these signs and images. And he suggested that everything we know is a simulation of reality. So a bit like the film Matrix, for example, if you've seen that. So we're living in this world of multiple simulations. We're saturated by images on media, by advertising, and these surpass what's real, it suggested. So he also suggests that we've lost touch with reality. We're hooked into these simulations, and this new reality supplants the real thing. So it's another reality. The representations are more important than the real. You know, you can think about this in relation to sometimes people taking pictures of their dinner or their food being more important than the actual kind of meal itself. So again, you can stop and think about whether representations have become more important than the real, and whether we've lost touch with reality, as Baudrillard suggests. So you can think about what you think and why or why not. So give reasons for your arguments here. So in his book Simulacra Simulation, Baudrillard suggests that that simulation is where the representation of things come to replace the things that are being represented. Simulacra is where you have a copy without an original existing, and some of the things that are highlighted is Disneyland's Main Street, but also Ollivander's wand shop as well, where you can go and buy a wand. And he suggested these phases of representation. So the first one is that the image reflects reality. So you could think of somebody taking a picture, for example, of a flower on their phone. The second one is the image masks or changes reality. So somebody might put a filter on, for example, and change the background. The third one is the image masks the absence of reality. So maybe the colour of the flower is completely changed, or the background, for example, as well. So it masks the absence of the reality of that flower. And then last one is the image is disconnected from reality. So there's no relationship to any reality at all. Maybe somebody else will take that image and alter it and take bits out and add bits in, and so there is no reality. It becomes totally disconnected. So it's completely different. There is no reality at all. And this is why I've put here an image on top of an image on top of an image, to highlight some of these ideas. So we can think about some of these ideas in relation to reality television. So I'm just going to suggest that we can apply some ideas from Aristotle on ethos, logos, pathos, and just highlight emotions in relation to reality television. So ethos is where the character and credibility of a speaker can influence an audience, and pathos is about the emotional appeal in persuasive argument. Logos is about the use of reasoning to construct an argument. So this is about persuasive communication, that in relation to some ideas from Aristotle. And actually what we can suggest is that reality television is about pure pathos. It's about emotions, and emotions in the extreme. So these TV shows are designed to entertain us and to make us feel things. So something feeling in the extreme as well, extreme emotion, which may or may not be real, because of course it's all edited, which is why we can think about this in relation to some of the ideas of Baudrillard. So just to highlight some of the television shows that you could think about, not just X Factor and Love Island or The Circle or dating shows. So Adorno refers to mass cultural industries as dream industry. So this idea of fantasy life coming true for individuals. And I suppose you could think about this in relation to reality shows. So they're scripted often, even though we might not think they are, or they're part scripted at least, whereas they're portrayed as being spontaneous. And we can think about YouTubers as well, who kind of fall into this category of reality television. So again, you can stop and think about one reality TV show and think about where it fits in relation to these kind of four phases of representation. You know, does that reality TV show reflect reality? Does it change reality slightly? Is there an absence of reality, or is it totally disconnected from reality? Is it simulacra? Is it completely fake and made up? So one idea that has been applied in relation to a particular reality TV show is looking at Benefit Street in relation to Baudrillard's ideas. So the residents on this street were tricked into appearing, saying the series was going to be about community spirit, but they were portrayed in a very negative way. And in fact the Labour MP said that there wasn't anybody who was a typical benefit claimant featured on the programme at all. And residents were quite angry at the depiction of themselves. So you can think about it in relation to these phases of representation. And I suppose I just want to say that actually one reason why this matters is because if these are kind of simulacra, if these are the fourth stage or even the third stage or second phase of representation, it might have implications for how concepts are perceived. So ideology. So it does matter. So Baudrillard then highlights this idea of how the image and kind of reality breaks down, this world of hyper-reality that we're living in. So Ronald Reagan or Trump becomes a simulation of politics, for example. So the line between facts and fiction, and entertainment and information and politics has broken down, and we get bombarded by these images, by these signs. So these come to replace the real. We listen to music on our phones instead of going to live performances, it's argued. We have virtual shopping. So this idea that then that there is no real, that culture and society is this flux of signs and images, that it's unstable, which is, this postmodern idea that actually we're no longer kind of structured in this stable kind of society. So coming back to this idea of postmodernism then, society is typified by symbolic exchange but driven by consumption. So this idea of signs and codes replacing reality suggests that we experience the world through these images, and we have all these smaller narratives vying for our attention. We don't know which ones to believe, we don't know what to follow. So signs take on a life of their own and become our primary, or can become our primary, determinants of social experience. So a world of hyper-reality. Signs reveal our tastes. They reveal things about us, and underlying it all then is this consumer culture and the things we purchase, and this idea that we're driven by these imperatives to enjoy ourselves, this fear of missing out if we don't, similar perhaps to religious fervour, and we're stressed and pressured to experience everything and miss nothing. So you could think about how we might experience the world through images, and you can think about whether we are driven by the fear of missing out. Now, is consumption similar to religious fervour? What do we think about these ideas? So I suppose we can think about criticisms as well, though. So this is why Baudrillard's called an extreme proponent, because you could argue that whilst there's convergence between the real and the virtual, the signs and symbols, instead of replacing the real, that actually we still know what's real and what's not. So rather than it replacing it, you could argue there's a relationship. And some argue that instead of losing control, we know what reality, we know what's bound up and connected with virtual reality. We have real virtuality rather than virtual reality. And you could think about, Dalek here. We know it's not real. We can see and touch the Dalek there at the, one of the BBC centres, but we know that it's based on something that is fictional. So these are some of the criticisms of Baudrillard. So just to summarise, it's this idea of society drowning in signs and images which can overtake our reality. And I have applied it to reality television, but we could easily apply it to social media, for example, as well. So you can think about this kind of these concepts in relation to social media, in relation to reality television, documentaries, dramas, all sorts of things. And I just thought I'd put this little picture of Harry Potter castle with a dragon. We might kind of, how we perceive these phases of representation, I think is fascinating. And here are some references for you.